The Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Thanks for tuning in for news and politics on Tuesday. Just talked with Jamshed Barusha, the Distinguished Fellow at Dartmouth College, who is the President Emeritus for the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art. He was tapped for his expertise in the recent national rankings released by Wallet Hub that we ran this week, putting Rhode Island last in New England, 25th overall. Got to pick his brain. You see these rankings, want to learn a little bit more about what goes into them, what could possibly make them even better. Had a good conversation with the professor. Appreciate him Skyping in. But we're going to come a little bit more local here now, here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I do know that Mike Araujo is around the corner with Rhode Island Jobs for Justice. Thank you for coming in today.
Of course.
I appreciate it. You have an event coming up on Thursday.
Yep.
Now this is Freeing Hugo and Rodrigo from ICE, and it's Hugo Mejia and Rodrigo Nunez.
Very good.
Yeah.
Hugo and Rodrigo were two workers in California who were picked up May 3rd on their way to work. Hugo is a member of IUPAT, which is the painters union. He's a drywall foreman. And Rodrigo is a carpenter, and they were both working on a military base. Came into work one day, and ICE was waiting for them. They were betrayed by another coworker or guard, and they were picked up. Their families didn't know where they were. Nobody was told anything, and they've been held in detention ever since. So we're trying to get them out.
So you're bringing this awareness to us. Now you said this happened on the West Coast, but again, being part of the unions, this is a bigger issue that's a concern to folks around the country.
Right. So, I mean, a union principle is that an injury to one is an injury to all of us. So if something happens to a brother 3,000 miles away, we'll be there for them. But locally, we also have Francisco Rodriguez at MIT, who's been here for 20 years, came here seeking asylum from the violence in El Salvador and just got an order of deportation. And so we're also trying to mobilize around that. So this is a large effort. So the union that he's part of is 32 SEIU 32 BJs. We're all trying to work together to get as many people out from these ICE detentions and reunite families.
And what have we seen since the new administration? Obviously, you see a lot in the news. You see these examples. Talk with us a little bit about that.
So there's been ICE, immigration, one thing was the change of the name. So it used to be Immigration and Naturalization Service, and then they changed to Immigration Control and Enforcement. So there's a tone change that happened post-2001. But more recently, we've seen them become really aggressive in going after really what I would consider low-hanging fruit. So if I was a person who's trying to deport, families who are open volunteers, who've been living openly and freely in the States, who have been participating, own homes, raising children, people who are not hiding. These are our neighbors, and going after them, and not going after folks that under the Obama administration, even though this was deeply problematic too, who had existing criminal records or who had there's a different criteria at play. I mean, honestly, we believe that nobody should be deported, that everyone has the right to due process. The ICE process right now is even beyond the extrajudicial process. So
and you just mentioned going for the low-hanging fruit, as you said, somebody doesn't have a criminal record.
Right. And so there's a bunch of negatives attached to that, right? So one thing is that it forces our families into hiding, and we shouldn't have a population that feels like they have to go underground. We should be an open society.
And you mentioned again their union involvement and working. There's sort of a chilling effect. Are folks afraid that if they go to work, that there could be that's a more exposure to being open to being?
Anecdotally here, some of our brothers and sisters at Onlyville Neighborhood Association have been reporting families are moving out of the country or hiding, going into hiding. This is a really dangerous thing. I mean, that puts them at exposure for being preyed on by unscrupulous people. It also puts them on the road again. It destabilizes, takes children out of school. Our economy is based on human beings doing work. I mean, the restaurant industry, the backbone is people who come from other countries. So to make it so that way people can't go to work, is to really undermine everything that we kind of hold dear here.
So you've kind of spoken to a few of the things I was, just going to ask. You've seen the rhetoric on social media. You've seen people say they're here illegally. They should go. They should be taken out.
Yeah. All right.
And so
so
you started
here's
walking.
the thing: is that the law actually is that they're not here illegally. They crossed a border. And they did it and most people who cross the border do it at an airport. The image that we usually have is people crossing the border in the South. The reality is TF Green brings in more people then, and people overstay visas, and then they're here. So it's a misdemeanor crime. It's not a felony, so deportation seems like a really excessive response to a misdemeanor, which is a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. And to go that hard after these families doesn't seem appropriate. It's like as though a policeman decided that at some point in your life you speeded, which everyone has, and that has made you an illegal forever. And that's just simply not a healthy way to run a society, to paint people with a crime without a trial, without a jury, without prosecution, without defense, just say you're here because of this misdemeanor, and so now we are going to disrupt your family and disrupt our workplaces, is so far out of proportion for a healthy society that I can't even.
And you're doing this here in Rhode Island on Thursday. Is this something that's going on around the country?
Yeah, so the Free Hugo campaign is a national campaign. There have been days of action in just about in Boston, Washington, Chicago, San Francisco, everywhere. People really, this speaks to something that really kind of cuts to the core of working people, right? You show up to work, you kiss your kids goodbye, and then you end up in a prison 2 hours later, never to see them again.
Now, there's information that you have on your page, on Rhode Island Jobs with Justice page, about this event. It sounds like they're still currently in detention, but the communication has pretty much stopped, it sounded like.
Yeah.
How does that work when that happens? How long can they be held for?
Well, so that's part of the big change, right? So the immigration system is a black hole. People tend to be literally disappeared. They go into it, it's very, very hard to find which facility they're being held at. Whether or not you can communicate with them is a lot of times an arbitrary decision by the officer who's in charge of the prisoner. And so tracking them down usually involves a very, very long legal process. And then getting someone to speak to them is an even longer process. You can call the ICE offices to try to track them or say, like, we need to find this person. They hate getting the phone calls, and sometimes they give you the name faster. But yeah, it's really, there's no habeas corpus for these people. And that is a bedrock foundational part of the way our legal system works.
How many folks here in Rhode Island do you think? You just
Couldn't
don't
guess.
know?
Right, you don't know. The estimate is more than 37,000. A significant part of the population that
is currently detained.
No, not detained.
Oh,
my God! Holy cats! No, so that's one of the things. So one of the things is that a lot of the 37,000 number is. We're guessing at the number of undocumented people in Rhode Island.
Okay.
The thing about detentions that's really difficult is that a lot of times they happen at night, or they happen in places when the person is alone, and so the report of them happens in sort of a scattershot manner. So actually compiling news about deportation is very, very difficult. Like the last really public deportation that happened here happened at Superior Court, when that Syrian man who was waiting for his day in court got picked up by ICE, it's a troubling place. So, and I believe that the judges spoke out against that pretty aggressively. Access to courts is pretty important.
So is this event Thursday, again, it's for these two particular gentlemen, but as you said, is it just to, again, create that sort of awareness around the country about, as you said, where the unions and the brothers and sisters stand about what's going on and what could potentially impact other members around the U.S.?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that the goal is. So one, we definitely want ICE and people who are agents of ICE and Homeland Security to know that we're watching them, that this is a national campaign and that we're paying attention to their every move. But we also want sisters and brothers inside the union movement itself to know that our unions and our organizations are committed to serving every member every step of the way, that we will go to the mat for you as long as it takes, for as hard as it takes.
And what do you say? I mentioned that again, that social media rhetoric about you've come here illegally, you should go. What about that? That undocumented immigrants are taking jobs of people who otherwise would have them here.
Well, yeah, you've
heard that.
Yeah, that's been said about everything, right? So and that tends to come from pretty much the same source. Like it's not a pretty broad source. The same people who argue that immigrants are taking jobs are the very same people who say wages need to be kept low. So you can't have both. Our economy depends on workers who come to do work. Whether or not the employer is sharing in that work or not is the employer's choice. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. We're standing in the studio. I'm looking at a pothole.
A couple.
Right. I'm looking at faded paint on buildings. I'm looking at broken windows. There's all this work that needs to be done. There's a shortage of workers to do the work, not a shortage of jobs. So we need to make sure that we're remembering the narrative has to go in that direction. And that we know that work needs to be done. Our children need to be taken care of, meals need to be cooked, buildings need to be built. That doesn't change. And that we need people. We need people to come here to do that work. We're a shelter. We're a country that's prided ourselves in being open.
So you've got this event Thursday. What else is on your plate coming up with Rhode Island Jobs with Justice?
Oh.
What's not on my plate?
We have a few things. We've been working pretty closely with United Food and Commercial Workers on a campaign to try to organize around Manton Avenue and the workers who work in food service around there. We're also working very, very closely with Force Laboral on more wage theft cases and trying to get legislation for worker-owned cooperatives passed, which was stalled in because of the budget ridiculousness that happened.
They're going back, though.
They are going back, and it's good news. We're hoping that we're going to be early on the ticket because we've waited long enough, and we have businesses waiting to start. So that's.
Did you get an indication? You know, we had folks in here actually talking about it throughout the session. That is one of the issues. Do you think it stands a good chance?
Well, it was unanimously passed, and it's a pro-business, pro-worker, pro-enterprise. I don't know.
So you'd be
Chamber
shocked.
of Commerce even likes it.
You'd be shocked if something didn't happen.
I would be shocked if something didn't happen. I'd be really disappointed if something didn't happen. So there's that. And then the big overarching campaign is that we're looking at universal family care to try to address the incredibly skyrocketing cost of early childhood care, which is as much as $15,000 right now. Well, the median is $15,000. This is bankrupting families, and so there needs to be some support. So Hawaii adopted a model where families would get a subsidy in order to pay for early childhood and elder care. We're trying to explore some options in that.
So, are you surprised that we found out yesterday that they fixed the budget impasse and they're going back in? Did you have any sense?
My capacity for surprise is gone. I have no more surprise left. I got nothing left.
Mike Araujo, no more capacity for surprise.
No more capacity.
But we're keeping an eye. They're supposed to be going back. The Senate's supposed to be taking up the budget this week, and again going back in September. A number of issues still hanging in the balance. And of course, we're wondering what they're going to do about the POS hogs.
But yeah, so I mean, it's an old stadium. We need a new stadium. It seems, everybody wants it. The unions want it. The governor wants it. It seems like the legislators want it. The city wants it. The neighborhood, the polling inside the neighborhood wants it. I don't know who, let's build them.
But there's the folks that say, it's a subsidy for billionaires, and you've heard that one.
Yeah, I know. I know the deal on I've worked in theater and arts for a very, very long time. These are not necessarily money-making enterprises, right? Sometimes you have to just do something because it's the right thing to do, right? Having a baseball team in Rhode Island is a wonderful thing. We love having the Paw Sox here.
So will you be out in support if there's hearings? Would you go to a hearing? Yeah.
Of course, yeah. For one thing, with my old union, that was a wonderful venue to host performances in. So there was that, and also bring the kids to the game is wonderful. I love it.
Well, we're halfway through the summer here. All eyes on what's going to happen at the Assembly. Might happen with the Paw Sox, but again, Thursday will provide an additional link after the fact, but you can go on Rhode Island Jobs with Justice. Go on Mike's page, go check it out. There's an event. Again, this is pertaining to this particular case of these two individuals, but as you said, you're looking to raise some awareness.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Mike Araujo,